Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyson Choptain. Thank you very much for joining us today. I am joined by Jordan Bissonnet, our solutions analyst, and we'd like to thank everyone for taking their time out of their day to join us for today's business process automation webinar. Just to start off and set the stage for everything, hopefully everyone received their skip gift code for this morning to be able to enjoy a lunch while you listen to Jordan and I talk about some of what we've done for some of our different customers. If you did not receive it, please send an email to solutions@broadviewnetworks.ca and we will very apologetically get that to you as quickly as possible. Today is a Teams webinar event. The ability to interact with us does exist. We would ask that you use the live reactions and raise your hand via the live reactions in the Teams window, or just start typing in the chat to ask a question. If you do want to ask a question live and have more of a back and forth dialogue, let us know, raise your hand, say in the chat. We can unmute your microphone and even turn on your camera if you want to have a more interactive discussion along the way. So the purpose today is to talk about specific examples of gaining through automation. And when we talk about automation, we're talking about business process automation. And business process automation is not necessarily limited to, automating by having a function that is done automatically in the background, but it's ways that we can reduce repetitive tasks. It's ways that we can help people get more done within their day. The definition of business process automation is utilizing technology to enable complex or repetitive business processes. So we want to take those processes that can be automated via software, via some technology, and make that simpler, faster, easier to do, or free people up for higher value work. It can also be a way when you review a specific business process to improve that business process and add functionality to it that you never had before. This could potentially help increase the quality of what you're delivering. It could improve service delivery, and it may, in many ways, help contain or improve cost management and what you're spending to deliver some of your results to your customers, your users, your organization as a whole. Generally speaking, we want to take applications and we want to restructure how labor resources are doing their work, leveraging software applications and a little bit of creative configuration of those applications. Not really pure coding customization, but just configuring properly for your environment to leverage that capability. We generally do these through micro engagements. These are not usually large, complex, month or year events to go and get underway. The goal here is to get a lot of quick wins for your organization for the time and money that's being invested. We want these to generally be low cost and take up, less than 1 to 3 days of effort usually. They're usually very easy to adopt. They require minimal training for your organization to start leveraging them. You want to see that quick return on investment. As I mentioned before, this is more configuration than traditional development work. Sometimes when we get into Power Automate and Power Apps, you could be closer to that development concept. But because the construct with which you build everything in the Microsoft 365 stack is already there, you're really just implementing it the way you want. You're not having to write code from scratch. And it's very easy to expand and build onto. And we'll show some examples of that later on. We're leveraging the Microsoft 365 stack for what we're talking about delivering to our customers today. A lot of cases, we're starting with data that's in SharePoint, probably previously wasn't in SharePoint, and we're putting it into SharePoint as a way to start leveraging that data more. We're using Microsoft Forms, Power Apps, Power Automate and Flow. OneDrive may be involved, and Power BI is usually being used for some data visualization and reporting functions for just about most of the examples of what's happening in those business process improvements. That is one of the biggest business process changes we see, is being able to improve reporting with existing data that an organization has. Couple of case studies that we'll walk through and talk a little bit about what we did. So some specific customer examples. Bothwell Cheese, we did some product and safety tracking for them and then expanded beyond that in a couple of different areas. LCM Security is actually a partner of ours that helps us deliver security services to our customers, and we actually help them streamline their client reporting process. Hydro International has an inventory and collaboration tracking application for equipment that they utilize in delivering their services. We have a regulatory healthcare organization locally that we worked with that wanted a better job application workflow for managing the resumes as they come into their organization. We did some marketing request management for an education resource center, and then some stat tracking on cases and reporting for a social work organization for the cases they work with. All of these solutions were in the $1,000 to $4,500 price range. We're not talking, $20, $30, $40,000 to deliver these solutions. Again, they're small, easy to bite off and chew and consume items that you can take advantage of. So we'll get into that first example, and that was Bothwell Cheese we talked about. So the very first thing we did for them was we took an Excel spreadsheet that they were using for their safety training or safety tracking. So they were filling out manual documents on paper and pen. They were handing those in to their managers, going to a safety officer. That safety officer was then putting that data into Excel, and then that Excel spreadsheet was then sent out to different people for reporting. So basically, you have people putting information into a document by hand. So now the person who's transferring that information from those forms into Microsoft Excel has to interpret what the people wrote and make sure they get that correct. Plus, make sure that when they're typing it in, they're typing it in correctly. So there's some data quality improvement right off the bat with what we did for them. And then we took that to another level and we moved the Excel into SharePoint lists. We created some Power BI dashboards, and then we actually created a Power App to replace the Word document, or sorry, the manual physical paper with pen that was being filled out. So Jordan, do you want to talk through this in a little more detail?
Sure. So here essentially where we're starting with the data is being stored inside of a SharePoint list. So this is replacing those paper forms, and now each one of these items becomes its own form. So when you click on one of these list items, it'll actually bring up a form that we see here. So now there's many advantages to a form like this. Obviously, where it's just digital, it will now force you to fill out specific things like the location, the severity, etc. So it's forcing a standardized I guess drop downs to ensure that people can't just put free text, which will then allow for better reporting in the future. And then once these items are inside of a SharePoint list, you can look at these items in a different way. So the next slide here, it gives you the option to look at these items instead of in a list. You can look at it in a calendar view. So these are all things that will really improve if you have monthly meetings with your safety group and your management team. Instead of going through a list of a bunch of Word documents that were printed out to go see all your safety incidents, you could just look at the calendar for the current month, review all of the safety incidents, and just by double clicking on any of these items in the calendar, it would just open up the form, and then you could see the actual safety incident. And then to take reporting one step further, in this scenario, the safety officer needed to produce monthly reports, and this was a manual process that was taking hours to generate every month. based on a bunch of printed documents that then needed to be put into Excel, and then dashboards needed to be made. Now there are just real-time reports that are directly connecting to that SharePoint list and just refreshing itself. And these reports are just available in real time to whoever it has been shared to in the management team, so that they can just review these themselves and not have to wait to the end of the month. And then on the next slide here, there was one extra uh, step added to this as well, where when a new safety incident would get filled out into the system, it would actually trigger off an email and send an email to to the safety officer and the manager of that specific department, letting them know that a new safety incident occurred. So it also helps to keep everyone notified, and kind of nothing slips through the cracks in that case.
So based on the success of what we implement for Bothwell Cheese for that, they came back to us and said, okay, on our production floor, we have an Excel spreadsheet for just about every type of thing we do. So for those that don't know, Bothwell Cheese produces cheese. Cheese gets produced in these massive blocks. All cheese gets produced in these massive blocks. And then those blocks get cut, shredded, and packaged according to how they want to put it out for retail purposes, or for their restaurant customers into larger quantity packaging. So there is a SKU and a set of instructions and an Excel spreadsheet for everything that needs to be done to cut this big block of cheese up into the appropriate style and packaging depending on what's being done with it. So we developed a solution for them that allowed them to visualize and more easily utilize this on the production floor by having tablets on the production floor. And on those tablets, they select the information they want to see, and then it represents what they need to see based on what they're doing. They actually have a sister company out in BC, and based on how well this went, it's been deployed out to that sister company as well. So Jordan, you want to speak through how this worked out for them a little bit?
Yes, yeah. So what we ended up doing here was like what was mentioned. They had a bunch of underlying data, whether it's reference guides, standard operating documents, barcodes, labels, and those were kind of just scattered. And especially if you're a newer staff member trying to find all the right information related to a specific SKU was kind of a lot of work, and uh, not straightforward. So what we start off with here is kind of a simple dashboard, and if you're about to work on a specific item, just by clicking on the button, it would then open up a secondary page dedicated to that specific SKU, where it'll now show you everything you need to know about that specific item, the actual recipe data, the specific job procedures for that item. And then if we keep going, there was a few other, so here just shows you a bit of the different things you would find on that page. So some additional safety documents, standard operating procedures, as well as the line layout. Where should the staff members be standing for which particular job? So it all just puts it into one place. So it's essentially just organizing these documents so that you're you're just looking at the documents relevant to that specific cheese you're currently either producing or packaging or cutting, versus having to go look through hundreds to find the one related to the specific item you're working on.
Excellent, thank you. LCM Security, as I mentioned, is actually our one of our security partners that we work with a number of our customers, and they provide security monitoring services. And as a part of their security monitor service, they provide quarterly reports to their customers. Now, that quarterly report is a set of data put together from a variety of different sources out of their monitoring systems. And so they were taking multiple documents, putting those documents together manually. A person was going through that work and doing it. They actually had a 500-page reference guide telling everyone how they had to go and create these reports for this quarterly process. So very labor intensive. And this isn't labor intensive work being done by students or lower cost employees. This is their high level security engineers doing this because they're the ones that need to review the reports after they're put together. And there's also a lot of risk for human error when you're copying and pasting data and bringing multiple data sets together. So we automated that process. They drag and drop the different reports into the appropriate SharePoint location. That data is automatically scanned and brought into a centralized data set that can then be used for those reports. And as Jordan mentioned, clients actually have access to those reports. And it took that process, that manual generation process, from about 5 hours on average down to about 15 minutes. And this is for high value employees that are doing billable work. And I'll let Jordan just describe through how that worked a little bit.
Yeah, so the main tool used to kind of do this particular project was Power BI, and leveraging Power BI's um, capability to look at multiple Excel or CSV documents and combine them to produce these data sets. Now, in a kind of perfect world, ideally, you would always want to directly create a connection to that system, but for whatever reason, sometimes the system you want to get reports from doesn't allow you to directly connect to that. But most of those systems give you the ability to do CSV or Excel exports. So in this scenario, we're leveraging that feature, and then Power BI is just refreshing itself, uh, mining all that information from those CSV and Excel documents, and just creating real-time reports. And then once again, a kind of second phase of these was made for more some more targeted reports, which are directly shared to the clients so that the clients can just go look at these reports themselves versus them having to uh, do like an export and email them to specific clients. So once again, it's just uh, reducing the amount of manual work someone has to do building them, creating them, exporting them, emailing them. That whole thing is just kind of automated, so people can go look at their own reports themselves whenever they want.
Excellent. Hydro International has a lot of lab and testing equipment that is used by themselves and their customers on a regular basis. And so when this testing equipment is used, it has to be calibrated and certified on a regular basis, sometimes after each time it's used, sometimes after so many uses, so that you can certify that what the reporting coming out of that piece of equipment is correct. It's very common in a lot of engineering and technical worlds that you have to collaborate equipment on a regular basis to be able to utilize it. And they needed this to be mobile so it was available to people out in the field. So a phone app was created. It provided that ability in detail. And instead of trying to explain it, I'll just show it because it actually shows it much better. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. So here, and you'll start to notice a theme here where once again a SharePoint list is made to house that underlying data of those record items. Now, uh, a SharePoint list is a kind of a data set that I really like to use because it doesn't require any additional premium licensing. It's all, since you're staying in the Microsoft cloud environment, it's just it really enables these tools like Power BI and Power Apps, Power Automate, all those to just talk to each other. So that's why you'll notice a lot of this stuff ends up being stored in a SharePoint list. So here we have a list where there's all the pieces of equipment from, and this is a app you would open on your phone or on a tablet. Once you select the piece of equipment, it would give you additional detail about that. You can also search for the equipment based on specific criteria. And then here it's can show you um, an actual photo or when it's expiring, the calibration expiry, but then it also lets you to dive down to go look at the calibration history or the related manuals to that piece of equipment. So now by just looking at that calibration history, you could last see when it was when it was done and by who, when does it expire, and any additional notes. So once again, just being able to look at all this from your phone as you're standing in front of the um, piece of equipment. If you need to do an update, change the photo, whatever it might be, it can all be done right from your phone. You would just click the little edit button. You could take a new photo of that new item if it's changed for whatever reason, and then just press save and keep going. So it allows you to do all of that from your phone, whether you're on site or on the field or wherever it may be.
And again, because this information is in a SharePoint list, if the customer wanted reporting on this, we could generate Power BI reports very easily, whether they be the more online style reports like we showed in the first example with Bothwell Cheese, or the more PowerPoint usable or printable type reports like we showed in the last example with LCM Security. Another example of a Power App versus a form. So, in this Hydro example, we used a Power App because it made perfect sense. And in the original Bothwell example, we used a form. But Jordan, can you just speak to the advantage of using a Power App versus a form for intaking information?
Yes, so forms you may be familiar with. You may have received forms, whether it's like surveys, a customer survey, an employee survey, an event sign up. Forms are great and very simple and straightforward when you need to just get someone to fill out a form once, and then once it's filled out, essentially they'll never see it again and never need to go back and look at that form again or make changes to that form. Once we need to start doing things that are a little more a little more advanced, that's when you would get into the Power App world, and there's a bunch of advantages of that on here. For example, the main screen of that app, let's say you open the safety app, the first thing you would see is what do you want to do? Do you want to look at existing entries, or do you want to fill out a new one? And then it gives you the option to either fill out a new one, which is the photo you'll see, the first photo in the middle, and then it also gives you the the option to do things like signing your name with your finger and then having that signature saved. But then you can also go back and look at previous entries like we had seen in that other app for all of the calibration history and the equipment. It lets you easily go find existing entries, view them, modify them if we've allowed that. Whereas a form, it's just kind of a one-time survey or sign up that gets sent out to people. It's very simple and can be sent out externally to people outside of the company. That's one of the main advantages of forms, but in the ability to do that, it has its limitation. Um, and then that's where you would move on to a Power App if you need those extra features.
Another good example of just doing a little bit of automation and simplifying people's lives is we have a regulatory healthcare association that we deal with. They were getting a lot of applications through Indeed, and it was going to a shared email address. So now we've got multiple emails coming into a shared email address. Now manual review is required to understand who's reviewed it, what information did they gather, what job was it for, and there was some manual work and sorting that was needing to take place when a application came into that shared mailbox, and then they all had to check with each other. Well, did you look at it? Did you look at it? Does anything more need to be done with it? So there's no status update information. Email is not a very intelligent source of communication, as we know. It's akin to writing something on a piece of paper, rolling it on a ball, and throwing it somewhere. And if the other person catches it and opens it up, great. But that's really all email is. This is taking us beyond email to a more elegant solution where we were able to simplify the process and provide more information. So, Jordan, do you want to just explain that a little bit?
Yes. So this solution here is leveraging Microsoft Flow or Power Automate, where it is scanning as a new email comes into that shared mailbox. If it meets certain criteria of where we now know this is a job application, it is it will create a new folder for that job and then save save the actual resume, the cover letter, uh, right into that folder, which is actually in a team. So now that whole department can just see the new ones as they enter, and they're all just kind of organized automatically. Whereas before, someone was constantly reviewing that mailbox, seeing when new resumes were being sent in, and then they had to manually create folders, move those files over to that team so that the rest of that department can review that. So um, quite a bit of time is just wasted constantly moving files over, creating folders. So that whole process is just automated where now they just have a list of all the resumes in a folder, and from there you can see they were just dragging and dropping those those actual documents into folders themselves to kind of help them determine which ones we're going to follow up on or not.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we've put any notification workflows in because they didn't require that. But we could certainly put notification workflows in for every time something drops into one of the original folders or someone moves a resume from one folder to another so that other people would be aware. So there's also that benefit of notification that comes with leveraging SharePoint to store this information.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We then had an education resource center that had multiple departments contributing content when marketing material was required. So you would have a specific marketing event or function that needed information. There was multiple sets of information coming from multiple departments from multiple different sources, and they had a very archaic, basically email-based way of the first person emailed the second person, did you add your content? And then you get an email 10 people later with 20 attachments on it, and it becomes very unmanageable to use. So Microsoft Form and Planner was used to help put this all together into a simple way to get it started, and then a very easy way to monitor and manage the status of that marketing request.
And here, so this here is an example of when a Microsoft form was the perfect fit for this. This was replacing, and what was mentioned is instead of that back and forth emailing that can't be tracked. Uh, for example, hey, we have a trade show in a month. We need 500 flyers printed out. That stuff can easily get lost in kind of an email chain where now you're forcing staff to fill out a specific form. What do you need? Uh, when do you need it by? And please attach any like reference material we can use. Now, once that form is filled out, it is then creating a new task. So on a planner board here, which depending on the type of request filled out in the form, it's creating a new task in that specific uh, lane here, where whether it's a design request or a video request, a production request, and now it is creating a task for that specific person, letting them know. And then once again, there was some email notifications letting them know that a new one was filled out. And now this is the board that the marketing team uses to track all of the requests and when they're due, which ones are completed. So it just gave them a way to be able to track and report and see all of the work versus just always looking at the email and trying to stay on top of all the emails coming in for specific requests.
Excellent. Another example of automating and gathering data together is a local social work organization. They had an existing Access database that was being used to track casework details. So for those that have worked with Microsoft Access, you know that Microsoft Access is generally location driven. You have to be on site where the data or the database is stored. If it's an old style Access database, just a flat file on a file server, or a SQL server if you've gone to the more advanced version. But if you're remote or working from different locations, you'd have to VPN in to be able to access that Access database. Not very good for modern use, mobility, and it's not the most user-friendly interface of all the applications ever created. So we moved that to being driven by SharePoint on the back end with, and correct me wrong, I don't remember, Jordan, did we use Power Apps for the front end?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Power Apps again for the front end. And, that really is a logical way to move away from Microsoft Access. If you have a Microsoft Access application today, is move the data into SharePoint or into SQL and then use Power App for the front end. So do you want to just talk through that in a little more detail?
Yeah, and so this one is a lot like that the safety incident example from the start of the presentation, where we're um, we're starting with a SharePoint list. From there, each list item becomes its own form, like what we see here, where they're filling out a bunch of different information based on that type of social work, and from there it is driving. From there, we have Power BI reports that previously were made manually, which was hours and hours of work every month to produce these types of reports. So now Power BI is able to directly connect to that list and then generate these specific reports. And then to kind of take that one step further, there was uh, since we were now using things in the Microsoft world, there was some new possibilities that weren't there before that you couldn't do inside of Access, where um, having follow-up reminders of when a case is closed, they needed to have a 30-day or a 60-day follow-up reminder letting them know, hey, you need to go follow up to see how things are, and then update that item that you've done your follow-up. So uh, there was some additional notifications that were also implemented into this solution.
And one of the nice advantages to visualizing data via Power BI is there is drill down reporting capabilities that can be set up. So when you're looking at a visualization like this that shows admissions per month, and the next natural question is, well, what kind? You can just click on that month, and then you can get the details of what all the other information that you had, you know, drill down just for that specific month that you're looking at. And of course, there is the ability through different filters and sliders and choices to select the data as well. But if people don't want to get that advanced, they can just click on, an image and drill down into the data below it. So where should you start? How do you understand, what you could potentially do within your organization, and how do you know if you're even ready for this? Well, we actually have a service in place to help customers move down this business process automation path. And really how we drive this is our cloud optimization coaching. If you have Microsoft 365 today, you likely already have most, if not all of the tools that Jordan talked about in the demonstrations that we did today. SharePoint, obviously Microsoft Exchange for email, Planner, tasks, Power Apps, Power Automate. Those capabilities come with most of the bundle plans. And a big question is, are you getting all of the value out of the plans and the services that you're using? So what we do in our cloud optimization coaching is we help you measure, identify, prioritize, and execute on changes to your environment driven by what you have available to you from the Microsoft 365 stack. It helps provide you a framework to identify where you're getting good utilization out of your Microsoft 365 investment. It helps understand and provide education as to new features and capability. And it's a good place where someone like Jordan can have a conversation at a very high level, introductory level, as to where you could be leveraging some of the functionality and features of the applications built into Microsoft 365 to improve that business process automation roadmap within your organization, discussing adoption issues, staying current on the latest capabilities of Microsoft 365, but also the latest threats and where your own security in your Microsoft 365 is. So it's an overview of how your Microsoft 365 environment is set up and how it's being used, but it often becomes the driver for, oh, well, we could potentially do this, we could potentially do that. And Jordan, do you just want to explain how that's delivered a little bit, please?
Yeah, so you'll see here what we have here are some kind of sections or overarching categories of the different types of questions that we'll ask. So here, I think if you click on the next slide here, this is an example of drilling down into the one section called business productivity, and in there are kind of many different questions or things that we'll dive into to kind of look, well, how are you currently managing expiries? What's your onboarding and offboarding process for your current staff? Do you have any kind of limitations there? Or how are you using forms? Are you even using forms? Do you know what forms can do? So we dive down into specific sections, whether it's business productivity, collaboration and communication, file storage, where are your files stored, what are your limitations, can you work with people outside the company easily, how are you currently doing that? So it's getting an understanding of where you're currently sitting, what are some of your limitations, and then letting you know some of the tools that you're most likely already paying for as part of your Microsoft licensing that could be helping you with that. And then there's times where you might actually be paying for a third party tool to do some of this stuff, not realizing that you can be doing it for essentially free as part of your current licensing in Microsoft, and in some scenarios allows you to cancel that other third party tool and start using the Microsoft version of that at no additional cost.
Excellent. So, we do really appreciate people taking time out of their day to attend these sessions. We know your time is valuable, especially your lunchtime. It's often when a lot of people take time to decompress a little bit throughout the day. So, attending a session like this, where there's probably a little bit of information overload, is very appreciated. And to show that appreciation, we actually like to offer anyone who attended a free cloud optimization coaching session. We won't give the detailed reporting after the fact, but we'll do a virtual meeting. We'll take you through that discussion about your environment and that scoring of where you're utilizing and underutilizing your Microsoft 365. And if you do want to take advantage of that, just send an email to solutions@broadviewnetworks.ca with the subject free coaching, and we'll get that set up. If you have an account manager at Broadview Networks you already work with, you can of course reach out to that account manager as well. But we have no problem providing that to show you, quickly the kind of value you get out of a conversation with Jordan. And I should mention Leon as well, who's a part of that process, more on the security and utilization of the tool side. But they both bring value to that cloud optimization coaching. So very much appreciate everyone's time and take advantage of that offer if you'd like to.